We're jumping right into this explainer today to unpack 3 chilling accounts that will completely, and I mean completely, shatter your assumptions of safety. You know, we often seek out the macabre for a quick thrill, right? We kind of assume that the most frightening things out there belong to the supernatural realm. Ghosts, schools, that sort of thing. But the source material we're examining today, well, it tells a much darker, much more grounded story.
So consider this. What if the scariest thing in a graveyard isn't dead? While a lot of folks go to graveyards looking for paranormal thrills, these case studies vividly illustrate that the most terrifying threats are actually flesh and blood. Think about it. When we step into these isolated, quiet places meant for mourning or, historical curiosity, our guard completely drops. We expect stillness. We expect to just reflect on the past. What we absolutely do not expect is the unpredictable, deeply unsettling presence of other living people using these secluded spots for their own dark purposes. Our thesis for this explainer is chillingly simple. When visiting the dead, beware of the living. The cemetery's real monsters, investigating 3 chilling case studies.
First up, the Abandoned Church Encounter, Case Study 1.
So, picture this. A group of teenagers decide that an abandoned cemetery deep in the woods is, like, the perfect, secluded hangout spot. This account centers on a young man who is trying to impress a classmate named Jane by venturing way past the known graves and into the completely unlit forest. And, as you might guess, one bad decision led directly to another. They push through these pitch-black woods, uncovering extremely old, moss-covered graves before stumbling onto a hidden, completely abandoned church. Now, ignoring Jane's clear apprehension, she really didn't want to be there, the narrator decided to play the tough guy. He literally smashed through the chained wooden doors and marched right up to the altar. But while putting on this fake mocking preacher routine just to get a laugh, well, karma struck hard. The rotten floorboards right behind the altar completely gave way and he plunged 10 feet down into a dark, rocky crawl space.
Now, the physical pain of that drop was severe, for sure, but it was absolutely nothing compared to what happened next. Left alone in this rocky pit with only a super faint phone flashlight, because Jane had run off to get their friends, the narrator suddenly heard this slow, deliberate shuffling sound. He shined his dim light toward a disturbed patch of dirt by a wooden beam, and a bald man was hiding in the darkness, just staring right at him. The man had these angry, unblinking eyes that seemed to pierce right through the beam of light. And then, chillingly, he didn't stand up. No, instead he began crawling on his hands and knees across the dirt floor directly toward the trapped teenager. It was this bizarre, animal-like movement that instantly shattered any illusion of a haunted ruin. This wasn't a ghost. This was a very real, very hostile person. The narrator barely escaped by climbing up a massive tree branch that his returning friends dropped down the hole. But honestly, here is the most unsettling detail of the whole shebang. 2 days later, racked with guilt that this guy might actually be trapped down there, the narrator returned in the daylight. And guess what? The heavy tree branch had been pulled up out of the hole and tossed onto the church floor. The man was completely gone. A living occupant had been hiding under a chained-up church, and to this day, literally no one knows how he got in there or where he went.
Moving on to The Morning Intruder, Case Study 2.
You know, when we're grieving, predictable routines make us feel safe, but as we're about to see, they can also inadvertently make us targets. This account follows a man who, after losing his beloved grandmother, found deep comfort in visiting her grave every single day after work just to talk to her. It was his safe space. And while he was there, he naturally assumed this curly-haired woman nearby was mourning too. She would laugh hysterically as if hearing incredible jokes, and she claimed she was just chatting with George. Because the narrator was so entrenched in his own grief, he extended his empathy to her. But in reality, she was using a stranger's grave as a prop to establish a completely false sense of trust.
It's here that the narrator fell into a trap, making a mistake that feels just utterly dreadful in hindsight. During a seemingly innocent chat where she was asking about his grandmother, he casually mentioned that she had lived a mere 2 miles from the cemetery. He then made the absolute critical error of adding that he had inherited the house in her will and was currently living there completely alone. Without even realizing it, he literally handed a deeply unstable stranger a verbal map directly to his front door, and it was all wrapped up entirely in the guise of friendly, empathetic conversation.
It's a terrifying reality that predators often use false empathy to bypass our natural defenses, right? Well, the consequences of that conversation arrived just weeks later. Coming home from a night out at around 1 a.m., the narrator found lights on inside his home. He hid behind his bedroom door and watched in pure terror as this very same curly-haired woman emerged from his grandmother's old room holding a photograph of him. She sat on his living room couch, completely unbothered, and began having this manic conversation with the imaginary George. She cycled rapidly between hysterical laughter, angry screaming, and then just dead silent crying. Then, staring into empty space, she abruptly announced, "It's time to go," speaking to absolutely nobody. She fled through an open window, taking nothing of value, just that single photograph of the narrator. And it gets worse. Later, a visit back to the cemetery revealed a truly sickening truth. The tombstone she had been visiting and laughing with for weeks didn't even belong to a man named George. The entire grieving persona was a complete fabrication.
Which brings us to our final account, the recurring stalker, case study 3.
So Jake buys this beautiful, secluded home that just so happens to share a backyard border with a massive, sprawling cemetery. Struggling with insomnia, he restarted a childhood habit, taking peaceful, late-night walks among the graves to just clear his head. He never felt uneasy until one specific night when he decided to leave his headphones at home. Suddenly, out of the pitch-black darkness, a voice calmly calls out, "Hey Jake, it's me." Jake spins around. A man in a dirty white t-shirt and sunglasses, at 2 in the morning, mind you, is power-walking directly toward him. The absolute horror here is that this fast-walking stranger somehow knew Jake's name in a town where he had literally just moved and where he knew absolutely no one. Jake sprinted home, actually taking a massive detour just to avoid showing the stalker where he lived.
Months go by. Jake somehow convinces himself it was all just a massive misunderstanding and eventually resumes his walks. But one night, he closes his eyes while resting against a large tree, only to hear a whisper directly behind him. "Hey, right behind me." A cold hand, stained dark, maybe with dirt, or possibly something worse, clamped right onto his shoulder. The man from months prior stepped out from behind the tree, taking off his sunglasses this time, and just uttered, "I haven't seen you in a while, Jake." I mean, the escalation there is terrifying, but what makes this encounter profoundly disturbing is how the man moved. As he stepped forward, he staggered in this highly unnatural, jerky gait, walking as if he was quite literally just learning how to use his own legs. Jake fled in a blind panic and never, ever went back.
This nightmare ultimately ends in a realization that completely recontextualized his entire childhood. Much later, Jake reconnected with his estranged mother. When he casually brought up the terrifying man in the sunglasses at the cemetery behind his house, his mother went dead silent. She finally confessed the real reason they stopped taking those childhood graveyard walks. When Jake was just a little boy, a man in sunglasses had approached them in that very same cemetery. He greeted Jake's mother by her name, followed them aggressively, and actually tried to lure them to his car. The police later confirmed they had multiple reports about this specific individual. The chilling truth? This exact same man had targeted Jake's mother decades ago, and now, as an adult, Jake had unknowingly walked right back into the hunting grounds of the very same predator.
Lessons from the graveyard, real-world takeaways.
Now, what's really fascinating about these encounters isn't just the sheer suspense of it all, but the highly practical, real-world behavioral lessons we absolutely must extract from these terrifying mistakes. These aren't just spooky campfire tales, guys. They're analyses of what happens when we assume a quiet environment is inherently safe. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, you've got to remember these critical takeaways. First off, protect your personal information. I mean, a casual chat with a fake mourner turned into a literal home invasion because of one slip detail. Second, honor your instincts when something feels off. Jane felt the bad energy of that abandoned church, but her intuition was totally ignored. Third, secure your physical boundaries. Jake's predator used that unmonitored border between a dark cemetery and a residential property to stalk him. And finally, never, ever underestimate the unpredictability of a living trespasser. The most dangerous things lurking in the dark? They aren't ghosts. They are desperate, unhinged, or predatory people operating off the grid.
So, I'll leave you with this final, genuinely unsettling thought to consider the next time you seek out a quiet, secluded place for some reflection or exploration. When you visit a place of the dead, are you paying enough attention to the living? We spend so much time looking down at the names on the stones, trying to connect with those who have passed on. But the true danger? It doesn't lie beneath the earth. It's the person silently watching you from behind the tree line. Stay vigilant, keep your information private, and always trust your instincts.